Just waiting a moment for everyone to be able to log in and get joining the session. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, looks like everyone's in. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trevor Wally. I am the program coordinator for AgSafeBC. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, Mental Wellness in Agriculture. Today's topic, chronic stress and trauma. Before we get started, a reminder that the session is being recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel in early April. Also, a quick note about privacy. Your cameras and microphones have been disabled for the session. We welcome your questions and comments. However, to maintain your privacy, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, not the chat function. Only the host and speaker will be able to see the questions, and they will not appear in the recording of the session. Today gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Robin Collins. Robin is a registered clinical counselor based in Kamloops who specializes in equine-assisted counseling and nature-based therapy. She's experienced with working with trauma histories and is approved by the BC Crime Victims Assistance Program, First Nations Health Authority, and the BC Professional Firefighters Association, among others. Robin says she grew up out of town playing with horses more than kids her own age, and later her love of horses and interest in psychology and counseling brought her to a convergence point personally, and she believes that horses provide a caring and safe environment for humans to heal, explore, and move forward in life. She provides nature-based, in-office, and online counseling. Today, Robin joins us to talk about chronic stress and trauma, how the body responds to stress, what to be aware of, and what we can do to make it work in our favor. Welcome to Robin.
Thank you, Trevor. I really appreciate the introduction. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking some time out of your day to attend this Lunch and Learn hosted by AgSafe. As Trevor said, I am a registered clinical counselor, and I specialize in equine-assisted and nature-based counseling modalities. And I work primarily with individuals who've experienced chronic or acute traumatic stressors. Just a note about personal safety. Please feel free to leave whenever you need to. If at any point in time you feel like you're struggling, please reach out to myself or any of the other clinicians that are listed on the AgSafe website. So right now I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I've got a presentation or a slideshow for everybody to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm talking about. If you need to interrupt or jump off at any point in time, please feel free to do so. And at the end of this, all of my contact information will be up on the screen, so feel free to send me an email or give me a phone call. So this presentation is about managing stress before it becomes trauma. So the idea I'm going to discuss today is that stress is actually a necessary part of the human experience. Stress builds resiliency. It's an unavoidable part of life, and it does have a positive impact on our worldview. But if we ignore it or leave the source unresolved, then it can become incapacitating. So today is about taking time to discuss how we use stress to our benefit and recognizing simple ways to relieve stress. And also, just a note, right now I am under stress, so I will be using some of my personal examples to kind of illustrate what our body goes through when we're under stress. So in technical terms, what we're talking about is the neurophysiological response to a perceived threat. What that actually means is how the brain and body responds to stress. The word perceived is actually really important because our body responds to every stressor the same way, whether it's being attacked by a lion or doing our taxes. No matter what the stressor we are being presented with or that we're encountering, our body will respond as if our lives are under threat. That's why understanding how the body responds and how to manage our natural response is so important. So, what is stress? I'm pretty sure all of us can name stress. What is stressful to one person is not necessarily stressful to another. But stress is anything that creates a demand or causes a disturbance to one or more of our body's physiological systems. A stress response can be caused by something as simple as being hungry or thirsty. A baby, to a baby, being hungry or thirsty causes a significant stress response because they're unable to fulfill that need for themselves. It causes distress because if they're not able to attract the attention of a caring adult, they will die. So that, yeah. But once the need is fulfilled, they calm down fairly quickly. As an adult, thirst and hunger still causes a stress response, but over time, as we've matured, we've learned to actually stay within that stress response. We've built a resilience or a tolerance to that stress because we actually now, as an adult, have the capability of fulfilling that need. So it doesn't cause such significant distress in us. The response that our body has to stress actually comes from evolutionary needs. We don't have sharp claws to fight with or 4 legs to run fast with. Our only hope of surviving an encounter with a saber-toothed tiger is to see it first and respond immediately. So evolution shaped our nervous system to do just that by releasing adrenaline, which I have a lot of running through my body right now. So I'm sorry if I trip over my words a little bit. So the body releases an adrenaline to increase our heart rate, increase our breathing rate, and cause our muscles to contract reflexively in preparation of running or fighting. If we're unable to run, our body actually releases endorphins that slow our breathing rate, slow our heart rate in preparation of experiencing the pain of losing a limb and surviving it. So there's less blood flowing to our extremities when endorphins are released, so that if we lose a part of our body, we will survive it. So from an evolutionary standpoint, the creation of our nervous system has been a success because humans are still alive. We still exist. But we don't run into many saber-toothed tigers these days anymore. So the extreme response of our nervous system is not necessarily helpful when we're doing our taxes. I'm sure everybody here has either heard of or experienced what is traditionally described as the fight or flight response. Basically, this is how we respond in an emergency situation to a perceived threat. So, depending on the level of threat, our bodies will respond in one of 5 ways. If there's no perceived threat, then our body stays calm. We're able to reflect far into the past and plan far into the future. We have full use of our abstract reasoning capabilities. If there's a slight threat, but we feel it is within our skills to manage, then our body will become alert. We still have the ability to think logically and plan ahead, though not as well as if we're in a calm state. But when we're in the alert state, we'll begin to check in with people around us or people that we trust. This is called flocking together. We'll start asking questions like, what will you do if? Or are you planning to do this? Or what about this? Hey, can you do this? Those kinds of questions. We will begin to come together as a group, as a flock, so that, well, there's safety in numbers. But once we get beyond alert, now we're getting into significant and severe threats. So those are the last three columns on this slide. So with each increase from alarm to fear to terror, our ability to think abstractly and plan ahead decreases. Our sense of time also becomes extremely limited. Now, the fight, flight, or freeze responses can be interchangeable within these states of alarm, fear, and terror, but you will experience one or more of these in each of those states. Now, the thing to remember about this piece of our physiological system, about how our body responds, is that under significant stress, we lose time and the ability to plan for the future. Only when we are calm can we make the best decisions possible in that moment in time. So I'm going to take a quick pause right here. So far, I've thrown a lot of neuroscience at you. And I just want to explain why. A lot of people don't understand why it's so important to do stress relieving activities or to implement self-care activities in our daily routines. If we don't actively relieve the stress that our nervous system is responding to, then we will always stay above calm. We will always be in that alert, alarm, fear, or terror stages or states of being. And if we're up there, we can't plan for the future. We can't make good decisions. We can't reason properly. Our body, through evolution, has actually become very streamlined. So when we're in fight or flight, all we're thinking of, all our body is responding to, is the need to survive. So it actually cuts off contact to our neocortex, which is where we make good decisions, which is where we work through problems and can reason. And we're in a time period where we need to plan for the future. So we have to have access to the neocortex, to the top part of our brain. If we don't, we're not going to be making good decisions for our families. We're not going to be making good decisions for ourselves or our businesses. We're not going to be able to plan for the future. We can't pick up the pieces. So that's why I wanted to get into how the body actually responds, because this is something that we cannot stop. This is how our body naturally responds, and it responds without needing access to our brain. So we can't stop it. So we need to understand it so that we can use it, so that we can continue moving forward. So that's my little spiel. I'll continue on here in a second. Like I said, and like Trevor said at the beginning, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A. And if at any point in time, Trevor, you notice a question comes in and you think it would be good to ask right away, please feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so we just went through the fight, flight, and freeze, and how we respond in each of those states of being, and what our capabilities are in each of those states of being. So now, how do we come out of it? So regulate, relate, and reason. So the triangle to the left of the screen, that's a representation of the brain and of the different levels of the brain. So at the bottom, we've got the brainstem. In the brainstem, that's survival mode. That is run, fight, breathe, heart rate, Yeah, that's about it. Only the basic things that we need to survive. And then once we get up out of the brainstem into the other three sections of the brain, now we're getting more evolved. The further up we get in the brain, from the brainstem up to finally into the neocortex, now we have the ability to reason. The cortex is the last part of our brain, the last part of our bodies to develop. For most people, we're not fully developed until we're age 25. So anybody younger than 25 does not have full use of mature reasoning capabilities, which you'll notice in your teenagers, which you'll notice in your elementary school kids, and your young adults as well. Most of them are not yet able to fully think through and reason through a problem and come up with multiple solutions or consequences to their actions. So back to stress. When we're under stress, our ability to make good decisions is negatively impacted. The majority of our brain power has reverted back to survival mode, which is down in the brainstem area, where all we do is breathe, keep our heart beating, run, fight. So use of our muscles. Yep, majority is brain power is reverted back to survival mode, and access to our cortex has been cut off. So our body is really good at cutting off anything that is useless or not needed to our survival. And the ability to reason is not useful to our survival. All we need is the ability to run and fight. So once that's been cut off, we have no access to abstract reasoning. If we're not regulated, we cannot relate to the issue, and we cannot reason our way to a solution. When we're planning for the future of our families and our businesses, it's essential that we have the full use of our brain power. So the first step is to recognize the state we are in, that we are running on nerves and caffeine. The second is to pause and breathe. The third is assess what we need in that moment in time to calm down. And the fourth, finally, is prioritize. We cannot prioritize if we're not regulated, if we're not calm. When we're dysregulated, we cannot recognize what is important to get done in this moment, in this day, and what's important that can wait till next week or next month. Okay, you'll hear every counselor talk about the importance of taking deep breaths and utilizing mindfulness techniques. I'll talk about why these two things are important later on, but it has to do with calming our nervous system, coming down out of anxiety or up out of dissociation into balanced calmness. Okay. I think we're probably going to end this pretty quickly before the hour. I've probably only got about 10 or 15 minutes more of talking. So I hope everybody's able to hang in here until that time and ask any questions. Now we're getting into more, less of the neuroscience, more of why this is important. So after this past year and the pandemic before that, we've gone through a lot of changes. For the past 2 years, all we've been doing is jumping from fire to fire to fire, just trying to survive. And we've had no relief and no rest. Taking time every day to practice calming techniques will ensure we make the best decisions for ourselves, our families, and our businesses. As humans, we are our own worst enemies. We tend to see rest or attending to our own needs as negative or selfish, as if we're less worthy if we take time for ourselves. As a result, sometimes we don't recognize when we're struggling. It's important. It is so important to be open to what other people have to say. Our families and our friends are going to notice when we're struggling, perhaps before we even become aware of it. And we might notice the same thing for them. But if someone works up the courage to come and talk to us and say, hey, I've noticed maybe you've been pretty grouchy lately, or you haven't been doing or enjoying the things you used to love to do. Please don't jump down their throat. They care about you and they're just trying to help. How do we build resilience? As a ranching and farming community, we pride ourselves in our ability to get through tough times, to be resilient. But resilience it's not infinite. We have to care for it. We have to maintain it. We have to refill our cup every once in a while. Because once we're out, we're out. We don't have anything left. So stress actually builds resiliency when stress is manageable and we can control the end of it, or we can end the stressor. So resilience is the ability to manage stress and then come back into balanced calm without feeling out of control, overwhelmed, or shut down. We are more resilient when we have a sense of connectedness. So now we're coming back to community, we're coming back to friends, family. A sense of connectedness is having meaningful work, meaningful to you, having a secure income, secure housing, having a connection to social, cultural, or ethnicity, having a safe and stable family, having a safe and stable community. This is what connectedness means. But again, over the past 2 years, one or more of these areas have been threatened. And generally, they've been threatened more than one at a time. Usually it's housing and income. It's family and community. It's loss of work, loss of business. So, but we can draw on the strength from our connections to others to be successful. If we're alone or we feel we're alone, then we have less capacity to deal and less resiliency to get through stressful times. To build resiliency, we need to identify the stressors and work to resolve them. If the stressor can't be resolved, then incorporating stress reduction activities is essential. And remember to draw on the strength of your community, of our community. That's part of why AgSafe is doing these lunch and learns. If you can make one and not the rest, great. If you can't make any, then watch the recordings. If you can make all of them and maybe chat to a friend about them afterwards, great. This is just about starting a conversation. So, stress is necessary and unavoidable. It builds our resilience and our capacity to handle tough times. Stress builds resiliency. A simple analogy from earlier is a baby gets hungry, causes a stress response, it gets fed, and the baby calms. This pattern happens repeatedly and consistently. The stress becomes predictable and controllable. The baby can control the stressor because it can bring the attention of an adult to get fed. It learns that very quickly. So over time, that baby becomes resilient and tolerant because its needs are fulfilled. This is a very simple analogy, okay? But in essence, that's how a stressor works. That's what happens when we become stressed. So we become stressed, we take action or control, we dissipate the stress. There you go. That's how it works. This happens over and over again. And with each occurrence, it expands our resiliency. Every time we take action, take control, and resolve the stressor, we're building our resiliency. For an adult, a stressor that happens at a consistent interval might be taxes, or might be going over your daily revenues and expenses. Each time we experience that stress, we become stressed. But each time we successfully complete the task, we're building tolerance for next time. The key point to building resilience is that the stressor is predictable, it is within our skills to manage, and it gives us the ability to control when the stressor ends. The opposite to resiliency is vulnerability. We become vulnerable when stressors are unpredictable, extreme, and prolonged. Unpredictable, extreme, and prolonged. Pandemic, fires, floods. They affected both our personal and professional lives. They affected our financial, physical, and emotional safety in the present as well as in the future. As a society, we've never been more vulnerable than we are right now. And now, on top of all of this, we are bombarded with news about the war in Ukraine. Maybe we have family, maybe we have friends who have family who are fleeing for their lives from their home country. Can we have more stressors put on us? So, how do we know when we're stressed? What are the indicators to us, and what are the indicators that other people can see in us that we are under stress? Emotional indicators are anger, sadness, prolonged grief, anxiety, depression. Physical indicators, because our body responds physiologically to stress, so there are physical indicators. We get headaches, stomach aches, we get lethargic, constipated, and so much more. Personal indicators, we start to isolate, self-isolation. We get cynic. We become cynics, cynicism, basically. And then mood swings. So again, emotional indicators. We get mood swings. We're irritable with spouse, family, friends. There's also indicators in the workplace. So we start to avoid certain clients. We avoid certain tasks. We miss appointments. We're late to work. We lack motivation. Right now, we're just trying to pick up the pieces of the past 2 years. We're trying to see what we have left to function right now and what options we have for the future. When we're under significant stress, we live in a state of alarm, fear, or terror. While in this state, we're unable to engage in effective decision-making. We need to engage in stress-relieving activities to focus on giving ourselves the opportunity to experience moments of calm and happiness. If we want to make effective plans for the future, we need to be calm. The longer we experience stress, the more vulnerable we become to its effects. So, what is calm? Calm is more than what you present to other people. Right now, I don't know if any of you can actually see me, but hey, I'm moving my hands, I'm moving back and forth. My words have become a little bit more fluent. I'm not tripping over my tongue like I was before when I was feeling really stressed out. But that doesn't mean I'm calm. Right now, I'm in a state of alert. I get really stressed out when I have to make presentations. I get really stressed out when I have to talk to a group of people. So right now, I might look calm, but inside, my nervous system is buzzing right now. That is not calm. Calm is a deep breath. Calm is relaxed. Calm is the ability to rest and reflect. Calm is regulated. So this is why stress relief activities are so crucially important. Stress relieving activities are anything that brings our body's physiological systems back into balance. A stress relieving activity is going to be different for every person. For me, a stress relieving activity is working with my horses. When I am with them, nothing else intrudes. My entire focus is on the current moment and the current movement of my horse. A good place to start and identify a stress relieving activity for you is think about what brings you joy. If you're happy, you're in the moment. Your entire being is engaged and focused on what you're doing. There's no worrying about the future. There's no reflecting on the past. This is what helps to refill your cup. This builds resilience. It gives you greater capacity to re-engage with the life stressor and work through it. A lot of things we think are stress relieving activities are actually avoidance tactics. Watching TV, playing video games, scrolling through social media. All of these things actually disengage our brain without doing anything to regulate our nervous system. I cannot stress how harmful social media can be to us. Not only does it disengage the brain, but we're continually bombarded with the negative messages carried on social media or even the news. We have to be critical about how much social media or how much news we take in. Yes, it is good to be informed, so keep yourself informed. Don't obsess. If you start obsessing, if you start ruminating on the news, on social media, now that's no longer just avoidance of a stressor. You're perpetuating the stressful cycle. Okay? So stress relieving activities don't have to be big. Listening to music, enjoying the sunrise with your first cup of coffee, going for a walk. Stress relieving activities incorporate one or a combination of the following three things: deep breathing, mindfulness, and rhythm. Rhythm is so important. So I'm going to jump back to a little bit of the neuroscience because, like I said before, every counselor is going to tell you that deep breathing is important. Well, why? So here's why. Deep breathing causes our diaphragm to move, which stimulates the dorsal extension of our vagus nerve that connects through our spine to our brain. The vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic. I should probably change the slide. Sorry. The vagus nerve is part of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming and relaxing our body. We have a specific part of our nervous system that is responsible for calming us down. And we can activate that part of our nervous system simply by taking deep breaths. Deep breaths take advantage of a response our body is already naturally conditioned to do. There is no simpler way to incorporate stress relieving activities. Just take deep breaths all the way down into your belly and make your diaphragm move. So the next one is mindfulness. Mindfulness requires us to put effort into focusing on one thing for a set period of time to the exclusion of everything else. Earlier, I used the example of enjoying a sunrise with your first cup of coffee. In this moment, you're seeing the colors in the sky. You're noticing the changes in the landscape. You're enjoying the smell, taste, and hit of that first shot of caffeine. You are not planning for the future. You're not reflecting on the past. You are not worrying. We are in that moment. Rhythm. Rhythm is interesting. So, rhythm is something we're actually conditioned to from the time we're in utero. Before we're born, our single source of regulation is the beat of our mother's heart. Babies can become calmed or distressed by the pace of their mother's heartbeat. Once we're born, mothers hold us close to their hearts and rock us. Again, we are being conditioned to calm down based on rhythm. This carries through our entire span of our life. Okay? Walking has a rhythm. Physical exercise has a rhythm. Listening to music or playing music has a rhythm. So if you take a moment right now to think of an activity or exercise you do that once completed, you feel a sense of satisfaction or happiness from. Now, thinking about that activity, can you identify the rhythm? Just take a moment right now. We all have at least one activity that provides us with feelings of calm and contentment. What is it? How do you move? What's the rhythm? So this is the last major slide that I have much to talk about. So we'll be wrapping up here in the next couple minutes. But I find that this is a very useful visual to use, okay? So when we talk about coming into balance, there are 6 areas we need to consider when we're thinking about our own health and wellness. We need to have balance in all 6 areas. The idea behind this wheel is that it needs to roll. It can only roll if there's an equal number of items in each section. If one section is overloaded, the wheel will stall out with the heavy section at the bottom and momentum will halt. Okay, so having a lot of items maybe in the practical section and nothing in the social or the emotional will eventually stall your forward momentum. Okay, we need to feed each of these 6 sections. When we're looking at this, perhaps you can already see some areas that maybe you're overloaded in, or areas that you have nothing or very little in. But we can work to bring ourselves back into balance. Stress relief and balance is a continual work in progress. Sustainable change does not happen overnight. One big grand change is not going to add up to the same amount as many little changes made over time. Okay, we're talking about sustainable change. It has to be one thing at a time. It has to be little changes at a time. What I'm saying is make small changes to your life by bringing more stress relief and self-care activities in one at a time. We're juggling a lot of things right now. And I don't want you to become stressed by worrying about how stressed you are. Okay? Just take it one thing at a time. If you add one thing into the social side, maybe it's going for a cup of coffee. If you add one thing into the mental or the emotional side, maybe you're a gift giver. How about you bring your friend or your spouse a bouquet of flowers? Now you have fulfilled an emotional aspect. Just one thing at a time, one area at a time, okay? One small change at a time, one deep breath at a time. Stress is hard. It's also unavoidable, but it doesn't have to be long lasting, and it doesn't have to have detrimental effects. So again, I want to thank you all for taking time out to listen to me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. You can post them in the Q&A section to Trevor, or my contact information is up there. Send me an email, give me a phone call. I also do want to make sure that I give credit to Dr. Bruce Perry for the slides that I used. Anything that said neurosequential network was developed by him. And the wellness wheel was developed actually by another clinician, Leanne Rose Dorish, and she gave it to a group of clinicians, myself included, to use. So that is it for me, Trevor. What I can do is stop sharing my screen.
Well, before you do that, can I have a question that came in that maybe you'll want to go back to the slide for, and it was a question specific to the slide on fight, flight, freeze, etc. And the question was, can you please explain the different states, reactive, reflexive, relaxed, etc. Followed by you are and a couple of smiley faces. So.
Thank you, everybody. So where are we? Reactive, reflexive. Okay. So this is how we think. So when we're calm, we can think abstractly. We have access to our neocortex. But with every increase in stressor, every increase from calm, alert, alarm, fear, terror, the ability to think reduces. So once we get up into the alarm state, now we're reacting based on our emotion. Are we afraid? Do we love that? Do we have some emotional connection to it? And we're responding out of emotion. When we get to fear, we are reacting. We're not thinking, we're just reacting. And terror is reflexive. Now, what reflexive means, reactive as well, is that when we're in an emergency situation, we are gathering information from outside of us and processing it through our body up to our brain. Well, our brain is not online right now at that point in time. So we are actually, our bodies respond without our brain. Our body responds without any input from our brain when we're in an emergency situation. You don't know the stovetop is on, but you put your hand on it and all of a sudden your hand jerks back. You don't feel the heat. You don't have any thought of, oh, hey, that's hot. We're burning ourselves. Maybe we should move our hand. No, our body has already reflexively reacted. I'm not sure if that really answers the question or gives the information that that question was looking for, but that's what those different things mean. Emotional, reactive, reflexive.
Great, thank you very much. Another question specific to a slide on the wheel of wellness. Can the same activity or item fit into multiple sections, i.e. a team sport?
Definitely. Team is social, sport is physical, and whenever you're in a social setting, you're also having an emotional response. spiritual. We're not talking just religion. Spiritual is so much more. Spiritual is connection, feeling connectedness, and whether that's to a higher being, a group of people, or an activity, or maybe it's a place in nature. Generally what happens, yes, if one item fills multiple different areas, but one item doesn't necessarily fill all areas.
Great comment. Okay, thank you very much for that. What about overcoming a new communication challenge known as ghosting?
Ah,
The
ghosting.
stress that can create.
Mm-hmm. When you're in a social situation, it requires two. It requires a back and forth. You can't control somebody else. The only thing you can control is yourself and your responses, your behaviors, your actions, and your thoughts. If you're being ghosted, it's not a polite thing to do in any setting or culture. Of course not. But you can't control another person. So, yeah.
No, that's a fair point. That may tie into the next question as well, or have some similar components, and that is, what are ways we can improve communication following these 2 years of prolonged trauma?
Communication is key. Taking time, active listening, not listening to respond to another person, but listening to understand the underlying meaning of what they're saying. Everybody is in a heightened state right now. So our ability to communicate is affected. If we can recognize that in ourselves and give compassion, give understanding to other people, seek first to understand. Okay. Take a breath. Yeah, maybe that email didn't come across very nicely. It's hard to have context or have intonation in an email. But try to seek to understand. And we're going to have an emotional response. We're in that state of alert and alarm. So our first response is going to be emotional. Take a breath and remember, not everything is about you. So just take a breath, seek to understand, give compassion, ask questions.
Great. This is a bit of a general question. I'm going to try and make it a bit more anonymous or neutral if I can, because I think it may apply to lots of people. But a member of my family prefers to just keep pushing through and working, but I know that they're hurting. They'd be insulted if the suggestion was given to talk to a counselor. What are some suggestions for things I could try?
Yeah. Suggesting somebody talk to a counselor can be very triggering. You're going to have an emotional response. Coming from a place of love, coming from a place of caring, is usually the best approach. It's probably the easiest approach to not get an emotional response. You know this person better. You know your family, your friends, your spouses the best. You know how to approach them. Saying, hey, I love you, but I can see the stress that you're under, and I want to help. What can I do? Can I take this off your plate? What if, hey, we've got 2 hours on Thursday night. Let's go do something. What do you like to do? What do they normally find joy in? Can you set up something that will give them a moment of calm, of happiness? Ranching and farming communities, this is what we're known for. We're known for pushing through. And as much as we take pride in it, it's a double-edged sword. We can push through until we have nothing left. And then what use are we to our family? What use are we to ourselves and our businesses? the best advice or thought that I can give is come from a place of caring, come from a place of love. Suggesting a counselor right off the bat, you're probably going to run into a great big brick wall. Suggesting going for a coffee with their best friend, they might buy into that. So you know best, really.
That's great. Thanks, Robin. And one other question that came in here, and that is, how do I know if my experience counts as trauma? Or where is the bridge between high stress and trauma?
So in society, we've started to use those words interchangeably, stress and trauma. An acute stressor, an acute trauma, traumatic event could be a car crash. Doesn't mean you were hurt in it. Nobody might have died, but it's an acute stressor, an acute traumatic event. I would, to generalize, and this is my own personal opinion, everybody over these past 2 years can claim to have trauma in their background now. Everybody who's gone through the pandemic, who's gone through the isolation that the pandemic created, the fires, the floods, the financial stressors, the family stressors that all of that brought to us. Yeah, that would, by the Webster's dictionary definition, be defined as trauma. It doesn't have to be long lasting. We can still define it as stressors because we are working to manage it. We are working to relieve it. We're not letting it sit within our minds and our bodies to control us. As soon as something affects how we respond to another person or another situation, as soon as we respond reflexively, that is coming from a place of trauma. That is coming from a place of stress within ourselves because we don't have control over it, and perhaps we don't even recognize it, that it's happening. So that's part of a counselor's job, really, is to find those things, notice those patterns, and bring recognition to it.
Great. Thank you very much, Robin.
Yeah.
I'll let you stop the sharing of your screen there and let everyone come and get a chance to say goodbye to you here.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Trevor. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope this was useful. I hope understanding the how and the why our body does what it does will help make it easier to implement stress relieving and self-care activities.
That's great. Well, thank you once again very, very much on behalf of AgSafeBC and on behalf of those attending today. Thank you, Robin, for your time and all that great information. If you'd like more information about Robin or Collins Counseling, you can visit our website. And I hope I've got this right. It's collinscounseling.ca.
Yep.
Right.
Pretty
Perfect.
simple.
Excellent. And a reminder to everyone here, if you haven't signed up for the other sessions, please do so. You can visit our website, agsafebc.ca, for links to the mental wellness and agriculture sessions, as well as a wide variety of health and safety information for farmers and ranchers throughout BC. Have a great Wednesday. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.